Hello friends, the ongoing crisis in Nepal reflects a widespread public disillusionment with corruption, injustice, and ineffective governance, and this disillusionment extends far beyond its borders. According to the Global Protest Tracker of Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, since 2017, over 800 significant anti-government protests have erupted in more than 150 countries. The endowment draws these facts from several sources, especially English language news media. It focuses on major events involving thousands of participants or leading to notable political changes. The surge in protests around the world highlights deepening frustrations with systemic failures, and these include poor governance, economic hardships, and social inequalities. A Statista report reveals that many of these protests from 2017 to 2025 involved violent government responses, with the largest occurring in countries like the United States, France, and several South Asian countries. Around 40% of these uprisings have been triggered by economic issues such as inflation and unemployment. Others stem from political repression and demands for democratic reforms. In 2025 alone, there were violent riots in Indonesia driven by rising inequality and economic grievances. Another was the collapse of France's government through a no confidence vote that ousted Prime Minister Francois Bayrou on September 8 amid disputes over budget cuts and debt reduction. These incidents illustrate how localized grievances can rapidly escalate into national crisis. Such grievances get amplified by instant information sharing on social media and global interconnectedness. South Asia, which is home to nearly 2 billion people, has been a hotspot for political instability in recent years. From 2021 to 2025, countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nepal have faced upheavals that often led to government collapses or military interventions. In Bangladesh, student-led protests in 2024 initially targeted a controversial job quota system favoring descendants of independence war veterans. But they quickly broadened into demands for accountability amid high unemployment and corruption. The movement, fueled by perceptions of authoritarian rule under Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, turned violent, resulting in over 300 deaths. Hasina fled to India in August 2024. Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus was appointed as interim leader, promising reforms. Yunus asserted, and I quote him, "This is a second liberation for Bangladesh, but we must ensure it leads to genuine democracy, not vengeance." Unquote. But tensions persist, with reports of reprisals against Hasina's supporters. The public disenchantment with all-pervasive corruption and bad governance continues. Sri Lanka's 2022 Argalaya protests arose from economic mismanagement. Sri Lanka's $50 billion debt, most of it owed to China, led to bankruptcy declaration in 2022. Inflation shot up to 70% amid shortages of fuel and food. The Rajapaksas were implicated in scandals like misusing pandemic funds. Unity across ethnic lines, Sinhalese, Tamils, and Muslims marked a rare break from historical divisions. Historian Jayadeva Oyangoda explained the phenomenon thus, and I quote him, economic pain transcended old hatreds, showing that shared suffering can forge new solidarities, unquote. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa resigned. Ranil Wickremesinghe took over. He secured an IMF bailout, but the recovery remains fragile. In Pakistan, a 2022 no confidence vote removed Prime Minister Imran Khan amid allegations of electoral fraud and military meddling. Pakistan's reliance on IMF bailouts amid 30% inflation fueled accusations against Imran Khan, who faced corruption charges. Social media amplified calls for change. Ethnic unrest in Balochistan, where resource exploitation benefits elites, added volatility. Protests also reflected youth frustration over job scarcity. Khan's arrest in 2023 sparked further unrest. By 2025, ethnic tensions in Balochistan intensified. Separatist groups clashed with security forces. Today, terror attacks are endemic throughout the country. Shahbaz Sharif's government appears incapable of running the country. The army's obsession with purchases of expensive weapon systems only add to its economic crisis. Massive debts and the FATF's sword hanging on its head may only worsen the situation. In 2021, the Taliban swiftly regained control of Afghanistan following the US military withdrawal. Afghanistan's economy imploded post-withdrawal of the US forces. Corruption under Ashraf Ghani alienated allies. War fatigue drove youth to migrate. Population was desperate for stability. Ashraf Ghani fled as Afghan security forces, heavily reliant on the United States support, collapsed within weeks. Taliban's advance became easier because of public disillusionment with a government plagued by nepotism and embezzlement. Indirect support from Russia, China, and Pakistan bolstered the Taliban's resurgence. The Transparency International ranked Afghanistan among the world's most corrupt nations. The Taliban takeover severely impacted civilians. Women faced stringent restrictions on education and work. According to the UN data, 90% of female-led households reported food insecurity by 2023. The US froze Afghanistan's assets worth $7 billion. This worsened the hyperinflation, driving millions into poverty. Over 1.6 million Afghans fled between 2021 and 2025, fueling a migration crisis. Nepal's 2025 Gen Z protests erupted over a government ban on 26 social media platforms, including Facebook and TikTok. The ban was imposed on September 4 to curb anti-corruption campaigns. This ban is reportedly lifted. What began peacefully escalated into violence. To control the protests, the police fired on crowds, killing at least 19. Now the toll has risen, and injuring hundreds by September 9. Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli resigned. Protesters stormed the parliament, setting parts of it ablaze. They torched media outlets accused of being pro-government. As one protester told writers, and I quote him, "We have had enough of old men stealing our future. This is about jobs, justice, and freedom." Unquote. Nepal grappled with 20% youth unemployment and frequent leadership changes. There were four prime ministers. There have been four prime ministers since 2022 amid corruption scandals. The social media ban was the tipping point as it severed communication tools vital for remittances and activism. Despite unique national contexts, these South Asian uprisings share core causes. And what are these causes? Economic mismanagement, soaring unemployment, entrenched corruption, and widening inequalities. Politicians in power tried to create one party state, while in Pakistan, the army ruled by setting up puppet governments. This pattern echoes global trends since 2010, with protests in diverse regions sharing similar drivers. The Arab Spring from 2010 to 2012 started with a Tunisian vendor Mohammad Bouazizi's self-immolation over unemployment and corruption. This spread to Egypt, Libya, Yemen, and Syria via social media. Outcomes varied. Tunisia achieved democratic gains, but Syria descended into civil war, displacing millions. Sudan's 2018-2019 protests over bread prices toppled Omar al-Bashir after 30 years. The youth organized themselves online against economic woes. However, their pains resulted in a military rule. The 2020 demonstrations in Belarus against Alexander Lukashenko's rigged election faced brutal suppression. Thousands were arrested amid economic stagnation and Russian influence. Myanmar's 2021 protests erupted after a military coup ousted Aung San Suu Kyi's government. This evolved into armed resistance with youth at the forefront. Ethnic complexities, including Rohingya persecution, compounded the conflict. In 2019-20, Hong Kong's youth-led protests erupted against an extradition bill threatening the city's autonomy, drawing millions to the streets. Beijing's severe crackdown, including arrests and censorship, stifled dissent but failed to quell the spirit of resistance. By 2025, global protest movements have surged. In Serbia, 325,000 rallied in Belgrade after a railway collapse killed 60, with citizens blaming systemic corruption. Ukraine saw its first significant anti-war protests targeting corruption in government agencies amid ongoing conflict. In the United States of America, over 700 demonstrations opposed Project 2025, which is a conservative policy blueprint with immigration issues fueling nationwide unrest. These movements spanning continents reflect growing public frustration with governance, corruption, and threats to democratic freedoms. And these are the factors that unite diverse causes under demands for accountability and change. Most uprisings begin organically as grassroots efforts, often youth-driven, but accusations of external meddling abound. In Bangladesh, for example, Hasina claimed United States orchestration over her refusal of a military base to the Americans, while others implicated Pakistan's ISI funding Islamists. Yunus's US ties fueled speculation, yet evidence points to domestic anger. Sri Lanka's debt woes linked to China, but no proven interference. Pakistan's cipher leak suggested US involvement in Khan's poster with China's CPEC investments visible. Russia, China, and Pakistan backed the Taliban resurgence after Americans quit Afghanistan. Nepal's protests drew claims of US funding via US aid against China's $3.5 billion BRI stakes. As Carnegie analysts note, and I quote, foreign actors exploit chaos rather than create it, but root causes remain local, unquote. Social media's role is pivotal. It enables leaderless organization but also misinformation. Preventing future uprisings requires tackling roots proactively. Economic reforms must prioritize youth job creation, inflation control, and diversification to avoid debt traps. Strong anti-corruption bodies need enforcement power. Political inclusivity, dialogue, fair elections, and rule of law prevents repression's backlash, as police violence often escalates unrest. Engaging youth through platforms, not bans, and promoting digital literacy curbs misinformation. Reducing reliance on single powers via multilateral forums fosters stability. Building civil society resilience with independent judiciaries and transparent governance is the key. Tunisia's post-Arab Spring reforms show success through democracy and recovery. Syria's war warns of ignored needs. As IMF chief Kristalina Georgieva urged, and I quote her, invest in people before crises erupt, unquote. The protests since 2017, particularly in South Asia, reveal global frustration with mismanagement, corruption, inequality, and unresponsive systems. Youth, empowered by social media, drive change but risk amplifying divisions. While foreign influences exploit turmoil, origins are domestic. Governments must embrace inclusivity, opportunity, and transparency to avert instability. Proactive steps can forge resilient democracies and equitable societies. Otherwise, unrest will define the future. In case you have liked my video, please do like, subscribe, comment, and share. Thank you.